Thank you so much, Thwani, and so wonderful to see all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. This is my third session with YJA, like third conference, and I have to tell you, you guys create such a beautiful environment of acceptance and belonging, and I think that's what really true allyship looks like. So thank you so much to YJA, to Thwani, and to the entire board for all the amazing work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add that we've had the chance to watch all of the sessions today, and it's been really enlightening that we're tackling topics from environmental stewardship to anti-racism. And so we're really excited to be a part of it and share with you our story. Now, in advance of this session, as Dhwani mentioned, we asked for your questions and we asked you to share some scenarios that maybe come up in your daily life. And your response was amazing. In fact, Vaibhav and I do this a lot. And the quality of the questions and the comments are the best we've ever seen.
Super.
So we kind of scrapped our plan yesterday night and decided we want to focus mostly on what you all brought to the table. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to split this conversation in half. We're going to spend the first half telling you a little bit about our story for those of you who aren't familiar with our journey. And then we're going to spend the second half addressing some of the scenarios you all presented and then taking your questions. And if you would like to ask questions, as Dhwani said, please send it in the Google form. But we'll also take live questions at the end. And since we're one of the last sessions of the day, we can stay on as long as you want and answer questions until you guys get tired. So
we got nothing to, we have nowhere to go. So
we literally have no place else to go.
So yeah, we can stay.
So I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about our story and about how we got here. And so I always like to say, how did it all begin? Our origin story sort of looks like this.
Fabulous.
That was me. And I think it's important because oftentimes when we talk about being LGBT, there's such sad stories about, bullying and victimhood. And certainly we have lots of pain and sadness in our story. But I think there's another way to look at it, right? As we get older, we look back, we realize that God has given us this opportunity to live our truest lives, our best lives, and hopefully, if you're doing it right, our most fabulous lives.
And the fact is that the word gay actually also means happy. So they're happy people.
So I'm gonna start with my story. I grew up in a really great and loving nuclear family in Central Texas. I was born in Massachusetts, but we moved to Texas when I was 3. And I'm the middle child among 2 siblings. I have a beautiful niece named Madison, who you see in this photo. And part of being a middle child is we're always sort of starving for attention, right? We're always trying to be recognized. My older sister and my younger brother suck up a lot of the oxygen in the room. And so in some ways, being gay was kind of a blessing because it allowed me to stand out in certain ways. And so I was the kid in school who did all the Indian cultural functions. I did the spelling bee. I was in the choir. I did Bharatanatyam for 10 years, if that wasn't like a major clue. I danced in Fogana. And, I played the role of the good son. I was the apple of my mom and dad's eye. And I was always trying to be perfect. But what I realize now, when I look back at these photos, it's a little bit heartbreaking because I know that that smile is really fake. And it's a smile that's hiding a lot of fear and a lot of concern about what would happen to me if people found out who I really was. And I wanted to particularly include this photo in the middle of me playing the role of Krishna, because I think a lot of the uncles and aunties when I was growing up would look at me and see me do dance and theater and music and think nothing odd about it, nothing like, oh, he might be gay, but rather he's our Krishna Kanaya, he's always playing with the girls, he's such a ladies' man. And I'm so grateful to my friend Purva, who's in this picture, because she played the role of a beard, right? She played the role of Parag's female friend so that it deflected attention away from the fact that there was something different about me. And all of this came to a head for me by the time I got to college, because when I was a senior at the University of Texas at Austin, I made the very important decision to come out. So it was October of 1998, and I was in my senior year, and I was watching a story on the news about a kid named Matthew Shepard who had died. And the reason he had died is because he was gay. And he had been kidnapped by a couple of guys, beaten to a pulp, left out to die, and after several days in a coma, he finally succumbed to his injuries. And the reason why that story particularly hit home for me is because Matthew and I were the same age. He was 2 months younger than me. We both grew up in very conservative states. I grew up in Texas, he grew up in Wyoming. We both had moved to liberal, progressive college towns. I was in Austin, he was in Laramie. And we were both sort of living our gay lives, our gay identities, a little bit in secret. And his secret had come back to kill him, and my secret had kept me alive. And so it was at that moment where I stopped being afraid and I started being angry. And I started being angry about the fact that why do I have to live half of a life? And so I remember going to campus that night after watching the news, and I went into the only office that was still open. It was a new advisor who had just joined our university. And I burst into his office and I just blurted out the words. I said, I'm gay. And he looked at me and he said, I am too. He said, and guess what? Your life is about to get so much better.
Did it get better?
It got so much better. But it was a process. In that moment, all the fear went out of me, the anger helped me come out. But I started a journey of several months so that by March of the next year, I was able to come out to my mom and dad. And those of you who've had a chance to see some of the videos and things that we've shared know that my dad, who is a perennial YJA speaker, was amazing. When I came out to my dad, he immediately embraced me, told me that he loved me, told me everything was going to be all right. And then he began a process of coming out to all of his friends and family members, my aunts and uncles, some of who are on the call today, and telling them that not only was I gay, but that he was incredibly proud of me and that it showed that I was living our values, that I was seeking truth and I was being true to myself. I tell the story about my dad a lot, but what gets less attention is the story about my mom, because my mom didn't have the same reaction. In fact, she was paralyzed when I told her. She went catatonic. And she went through a really tough period of being depressed and of being sad and of blaming herself. And it was really hard for me because I'm actually really close to my mom. I consider myself a mama's boy. And so the idea that my mom had the reaction she did broke my heart. And I remember getting angry with her a few years later saying, you abandoned me when I needed you most. Moms are supposed to love their kids no matter what. And you heard I was gay and suddenly you pieced out on me. And she didn't really respond to me, but a few years later, I was living in Washington, D.C. She sent me a care package. And inside the care package was some cheranu and some, snacks and some bartan. And then she had included a Bollywood DVD of Dostana, the movie with John Abraham and Abhishek Bachchan. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my mom sent me a Bollywood movie about two guys pretending to be gay. And then I watched the movie. And there's this amazing scene in the film where John Abraham and Abhishek Bachchan are pretending to be gay so they can live in an apartment in Miami. And Priyanka Chopra is their female roommate. And Abhishek's mom comes from India to visit him and finds out that he's gay. And she's shocked and horrified, and he gets really upset with her. Inside, kind of like I did, he's like, how can you not accept me, mom? And he storms out of the apartment. And he comes back later that night, and his roommate, played by Priyanka Chopra, is waiting for him. And she says to him, how could you do that to your mom? And he said, well, my mom should love me no matter what. How could she treat me that way? And Priyanka Chopra says, you had your whole life to get comfortable with who you are. You gave your mom 2 minutes. It was in that moment that I understood what my mom was trying to tell me, which was we have to be patient. We have to lead with love, and we have to forgive, because people are not going to get it right. People are not going to always say the things we want them to say and always be right about it. But my goodness, there's so much love in our family. There's so much bond between parents and children. If we give that patience, more often than not, we might be rewarded for it. And so I'm really lucky that I found that patience and that love, because the end result for my journey was much better because I did. Thanks.
Thank you, Parag. So my journey was a little bit different than Parag's because I grew up in New Delhi, India, and I grew up in a joint family. So for those of you who may not be aware, so joint family is this, custom that we do where all the uncles and the aunts, everybody stays together. So I did not have one set of parents. I had 5 set of parents. I have 5 uncles and aunts, my parents, my grandparents, 11 cousins, everybody growing up together. And in all of this chaos, I was the chutku one, right here, the tiny one. And I had so much of love, so much of pampering, but I always knew that there was something off. There was something different about me. I did not know what it was. Being in India, I didn't have any resources, but I think around age 10 or 11, I started to feel different. My friends are looking at girls and, talking about girls, and I'm looking at my friends and I'm like, oh. So these emotions are just like confusing me. And I knew that this is not normal, and I knew that I should not talk about it. Didn't think much of it, but a lot of this, difference and, the different that I felt inside, people actually see it in school. And that all manifested into severe forms of bullying. So I was bullied from middle school all the way through high school, and even sometimes in college. And one particular story I want to share with all of you today is, the story that started around when I was in maybe 6th to 7th grade. And every year, when the new session started in school, the class teacher would come and say, well, we're going to choose two class monitors, one boy and one girl. And for those of you who don't know what a class monitor is, like you've seen Harry Potter, right? So it's like a head boy and a head girl for the entire school. We had a head boy and a head girl, but we also had class monitors for every class, a boy and a girl. So every time they would choose a boy, nobody would say anything. But the moment people would start, I mean, the teacher would ask for nominations for a girl, my heart sank. I knew what was coming. I was just put my head down and tears in my eyes and just closed my eyes really tight. I remember chanting Navkar Mantra and I'm like, this is it. This is going to happen now. My entire class would start shouting my name. Vaibhav, Vaibhav, Vaibhav for the female monitor. And this didn't stop in 1 year. It kind of went on. It became like a tradition. Every single year started by me being bullied. And not just students, even teachers participated because they were like, well, it's just a harmless joke. But what they didn't realize that it broke me from inside. It traumatized me. The first day of school, kids enjoy first day of school. I dreaded first day of school because it was so horrible and so hard. So I knew all along that, India is not going to be, a place that I can, sustain myself really long. And I didn't even know what the word gay was until I was in maybe 10th grade or 11th grade. A friend of mine told me, that's what it is. And I'm like, whoa, if nobody talks about it, I know better. I shouldn't be talking about it at all. So this kid, in me, I became a dentist, into my parents' desire for me to become a doctor. And when I did that, I told my parents, I don't think I can, live in India. I want to do public health. So they, resisted. They're like, no, stay back in India. I'm like, well, I have other reasons. Please let me go. So in 2011, August of 2011, I moved to the US about 10 years ago and did a master's in public health. And a year into living in the US, I met my wonderful partner and now husband of, a year, Parag Mehta. And, when I met Parag, a lot of you know him for a while because he had been out at that time for about 10 years now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I was deeply closeted. But what I promised myself is that when I come to America, I'm going to stop living the dual life. Because in India, people would ask me, do you have a girlfriend? Do you play cricket? And I'm like, yeah, I do all of that. Making, fake girlfriends when I'm in like Delhi, tell my girlfriend's in Bangalore. When I go to Bangalore, telling people my girlfriend's in Delhi.
Yeah, like, for us, it's my girlfriend's in Canada, always.
So yeah, something like that. So yeah, so then I moved to the US and I'm like, I have to live an honest life. So I started telling, my friends, my teachers, in college, in university, that I'm gay. And when I met Parag, he was very understanding. And he was like, Vaibhav, I know it's an incredibly hard process for anybody. And at the end of the day, it's your truth. And it's your truth to tell. Nobody should ever take that away from you. Always remember that. And when you're ready, you should tell whoever you want to tell. Nobody is pressurizing you. Nobody's saying anything about it. I love you, no matter who you are. I love you for who you are. So I understood all of that. But, I also felt so trapped because I felt like this man is so public about his sexuality and he fought all of this. He came out of the closet fighting all of this, stigma and all of that. Why am I pushing him back into the closet in this relationship? So a year into our relationship, I got this wonderful opportunity to work with the World Health Organization. And I went to Switzerland, the headquarters over there. And, so World Health Organization is like the CDC of the world. And it's a huge deal because it's part of the United Nations. So my parents were beaming with joy, so excited. Look at our son working for the United Nations. Couldn't stop talking about it to every friend and relative they met. And, the next question was, when can we come to see you? Switzerland, we have to come see all the sites where the Bollywood movies were shot, where all those trains were, train shots were taken. We want to do that. And I'm like, this is it. Oh my God, let's totally do it, Mom and Dad. And they came down in the summer of 2013 and we spent beautiful a week together. I showed them around Switzerland and I took them to Paris, went around, took a little tour around France and then came back to Switzerland. Around that time, something I knew that people had started to talk about, our relationship because Parag and I had posted pictures and accidentally one of the pictures that was posted, I had accepted the tag on it. So some of my cousins started to find out that I'm like romantically involved with the guy. So at that time, Parag was like, here's the thing. It's better coming from you than anybody else. Because if they were to find out from somebody else, it would break them. And Vaibhav, I love your parents. He had actually met my parents a year before.
They're the nicest people.
Yeah, actually a few weeks before because of my graduation from my master's program. And he said, they're such kind people. You deserve to tell them, but tell them at your own pace, at your own time. But this is a golden opportunity. So totally do it if you have to. I'm like, sure, let's do it. So at the end of our trip, I am sitting, in my hotel room with my parents, and they're packing, and I start to cry. And my mom's like, beta, what happened? I'm like, no, nothing. And my parents like, no, don't cry, beta. We'll come back and see you. Don't worry. Why are you so upset? I'm like, no, that's not the reason. I love you. Yes, I'm going to miss you, but there's something else that's going on. And they're like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't want to get married. They're like, nah, that's it. That's what you care about. It's all right. You don't have to get married. There's so many people who don't have to get married. So don't worry about it.
By the way, that in and of itself is a big thing for Indian parents to say.
And I was like, damn, okay. Because,
you're like, okay, that's one topic off.
My parents had, my brother had just gotten married. So the pressure was building that, okay, we have to find somebody for them. And I said, no, actually, I am not interested in girls. And my mom's like, okay, you're not interested in girls, elaborate. And I'm like, I'm gay. They didn't even know what the word gay meant. So I had to explain to them that this is an attraction for a man. I have attraction for men. And both my parents froze. And it was very difficult, and I couldn't stop crying. And all I could think was, I don't know how I'm gonna take this forward, but I said it, but it was really hard. And lucky for me, my dad came up and put his hand on my shoulder, and then he was like, "Beta, sab kuch theek ho jayega," which means everything's gonna be okay. Don't worry about it. And my mom, just like Parag's mom, was catatonic, and she took it really hard. But then started a series of uncomfortable questions for a matter of 2-3 hours, and they asked me questions of questions of a nature that I would never have expected my parents would ask of me. And I'm like, I have to answer this confidently. Otherwise, if any shred of doubt is left in their mind, they would think that, oh, he's in a phase or whatever. And at that moment, throughout this, process, I told my mom I was bullied and all of that. And my mom was like, beta, I think I failed as a parent. And I was broken. I was like, why would you say that? Are you saying this because I'm gay, because I turned out to be gay? She's like, no, beta, because you took 27 years of your life to tell me such a huge truth about your life. I failed as a parent because I couldn't give you that space, that comfort for you to be comfortable and talk about your truth.
She said, I'm the parent. It's my job to worry about you. It's not your job to worry about me. And when he called me the next day and told me that, I was like, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. But again, it was hard, and it took them about 6 years, and I finally got married. So I also wanted to address at this time what Jainism talks about, homosexuality or being gay. I grew up in a deeply religious Digambar Jain household, and I believed in my grandparents, my parents always taught us that, the importance of our religion and how important it is to stick to the tenets of Jainism. So I often struggled, and I didn't understand, what does Jainism say about homosexuality? Actually, not much. I mean, it's not like other, Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, where there is explicit text in their religious scriptures saying that, it's an abomination and, prohibited. Our religion actually celebrates sexuality, if you would know. There are references in our canonical texts that talk about the third gender and talking about the fact that, a human spirit can be that of a masculine gender, a feminine gender, or a neuter gender. So it beautifully talks about that. But more largely, what I've also understood that Jainism is a faith of acceptance. Our tenets, the main tenet in Hindi that I've learned was Jiyo Jeevan Do, which means live and let live. And our entire principle around Jainism is, you live your life and love every other creature and let them live their lives. So I think that's my first argument around how homosexuality should be looked at. The second thing is around aparigraha, giving up everything. And aparigraha is around the fact that, we are, in this situation where I constantly have to think about so many, attachments in my life. I'm constantly thinking about, this nature of attachment of relationship, my life and my love, my relationship, my partner, my family, what I'm attached to. So you have to be, removed from the attachment. You have to be removed from any attachment. Homosexuality or heterosexuality, any relationship for that matter, is actually considered to be, a hindrance to salvation.
Because you're acquiring karma by being attached to a person.
So if you're acquiring karma in any form of relationship, you are not attaining moksha. So if it's a homosexual relationship, I'm still, acquiring karma. So in order to attain that, moksha, I have to give up everything. So I think I'm living my life just fine the way it is. Nobody should be judging me.
I just want to add, like, I think, because I also grew up in a Jain household, and unlike Vaibhav, who grew up Digambar, I grew up Shwetambar. But one of the common tenets that we all sort of grew up hearing is about ahimsa, right?
Yeah.
And we focus so much on nonviolence. Behind me is Gandhi, there's Dr. King, both sort of champions of nonviolence. But what we forget is that there's a second equally important principle, which is to seek truth. Yeah. And for both of us, as we thought about our journey as being LGBT and being part of the Jain community, we recognized that seeking truth meant that we had to first be true to ourselves. Because as you're growing up, if you're lying to yourself, and if you're then spinning lies for others, and then lie after lie after lie, by the way, all understandable lies, right? You're doing it for self-preservation, but you're getting further away from your true soul. You're getting away from your true self. And so for us, in order to be good Jains, we had to embrace our truth, and we had to be open about our truth.
Yep. So to that point, Anikantvad, which talks about multiplicity of truth. You and I don't really know what the truth is of the universe. It's only the Arihantas who can, talk about the truth, which is Keval Gyan. When we don't know what real truth is, how can you, doubt what my truth is, and how can I doubt your truth? So if I'm gay as a human being, you can't question my homosexuality. I'm a creation of God. And similarly, I can't question you being straight because you're also a creation of God. A lot of these texts that were written, in Jainism were written hundreds of years ago. And they were actually, we believe that Tirthankar Bhagwan, when they gave that Samusharan and they spoke of these wise words, they were written generations later. So a lot of what was written was actually interpretation of what people understood, what the Tirthankars were saying.
I think we also have to remember that faith doesn't exist in a vacuum. So there are things that are part of our religion, part of the canonical text that Vaibhav talks about, the scriptures. And then there's things that have culturally been added on over the years. Yeah. And particularly when you think about the history of India and the history of invasion, whether it was by the Mughals and then by the British, they added their own layers of sort of shame around sexuality. And we've gotten further and further away from what the traditional Indian culture was, where we celebrated sex in its many forms. And by the way, we celebrated gender. As Vaibhav pointed out, India was one of the first countries to formally recognize the third gender. When you fill out a government form in India, you don't just have the choice of male and female, you have the third gender choice. So the fact is that this has always been a part of our culture, it's always been a part of our history, and only now are we starting to reconnect with it.
Yeah. And then very quickly, the last point was around the fact that, there is this energy fields that we believe in, and they're called Gunasthan. So there are 14 Gunasthan, and their Gun basically means, value or quality. So to reach that 14 Gunasthan is after which you can attain Nirvana. Our Tirthankar Bhagwan actually reached the 14th Gunasthan. You and I at this phase are only reaching at the second Gunasthan. And, talking ill of somebody, talking, having jealousy, which was, from somebody, or talking, bad, or, seeing anything negative about anybody is not going to help us move forward in our journey to Nirvana. It's only going to, acquire us more karma.
So with that background, I want to just spend a little bit of time, and then we'll go into your questions, with talking a little bit about the story of our relationship. I noticed Kinari asked us to make clear one thing, which is that gender identity and sexual orientation are two different things.
Absolutely.
Sexual orientation is about your sexual attraction to a person of the opposite sex or a person of the same sex, heterosexual, homosexual. So this is gay, lesbian, bisexual, and straight. Gender identity is about what gender do you identify with. Yeah. Some people are born with male genitalia and then identify as male. Some are born with female and then identify as female. Some identify as non-binary, which they don't believe that they're either male or female. And then some people believe that they are born with one gender, but they identify with the other, and we call those people transgender. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to realize all of those are valid ways to live your life. It's about who you are and who you love, and nobody else should judge you for that. Nobody else has a right to say over it. And it's biological. It is not a choice that we make. It's not a lifestyle that we pick. It is who we are. So for us, as we fell in love and our relationship got deeper, we came out to our parents and our parents embraced our love. We started this idea of what does it mean to get married? And in the US, it became legal for us to get married in 2015 across the entire country. Yes. And before that, it was sort of state by state. And in India, it's still not legal, but India has, in the last 2 years, decriminalized homosexuality. So we began a process of talking with our parents about getting married and doing it in a formal way in a traditional Jain wedding.
Yeah. So the traditional Jain wedding, the way we did it is that we tried to modify as much as we can. Our traditional, Indian weddings or Jain weddings are very gender specific. We wanted to make it as gender neutral as possible. So some of the things that Parag and I did when we were working on that script is that something like Kanyadan, which basically means giving away of the daughter. I'm like, why does the daughter have to be given away? Why can't the grooms be given away?
It's actually pretty sexist, by the way. If you really think about the Jain and Hindu wedding ceremony, it's very sexist in the way that it treats the woman. But when you're a gay couple, you have to sort of reinvent all of that.
Yeah. And then, so I made it Vardhan, which is Var basically means in Hindi groom, and Dan is to give away. And Vardhan, when you put it together, it's a blessing from God.
The word Vardhan.
So at one point of time in the wedding, my parents came and gave me away to Parag's family, and then Parag's parents came and gave him to my family. And then similarly, at the very end, there's this tradition called Akhanda Saubhagyavati, which is, a blessing for long life for the woman, the bride. And I'm like, no, we have to change that. So we made it into Chiranjeevi Bhav, which means live a long life. And, at that point, women of the family come to the stage and whisper, marital advice in your ears. We had women in our family. My Masi came, Parag's Masi came, my Bua came, Parag's Bua came. But we also had same-sex couples. We had a lesbian couple come on the stage and, whisper marital advice, a gay couple come. So we try to incorporate, these rituals, making them gender neutral, making them meaningful to us, but also for people around us. And what I wanted to quickly mention was that in this process, of planning our wedding and coming out, I really wanted Parag to meet my grandmother, my nanny, my mother's mom.
She was the only living grandparent left for either one of us,
who you see on the screen at the moment. And my mother was really scared how to tell my nanny. And she, mustered the courage and she finally did. But before, what I did was I actually told my younger cousins who lived with nanny, my mama's kids, and said, can you just start talking about that subject? Can you just tell her that there's something called as homosexuality? Yeah, it'll scandalize her, but just, do it in a very benign manner.
You have to remember that this nanny lived in a town called Barabanki, which is a small rural town outside of Lucknow. So the concept of homosexuality was so far removed for her. So Vaibhav's strategy was to start feeding her information about gay people and their existence, to sensitize her, so that when the mom finally came out to her, she'd be ready for it.
And when my mom came out, she said, is Vaibhav happy? Is Vaibhav healthy? Oh yeah, what else matters here? Imagine the amount of love that Vaibhav is getting from this other person. Just be happy for your son and be happy for who he is. And my mom's like, Vaibhav's really insisting that he wants to make you meet Parag. She's like, beta, absolutely bring both of them. Just like Vaibhav, Parag would also be my grandson. And, I was so fortunate that Parag met her last January and we went to India for a week to do our wedding shopping. And this is when I introduced Parag to my nanny, and we gave her this sari. Unfortunately, she passed away 5 months later in July.
But before she passed away, she got a chance to watch our wedding on Facebook Live to celebrate with us. And if you see the picture in the bottom right, we have a custom in India where when you give the wedding invitation, you give it in order of seniority. So the first wedding invitation goes to Bhagwan, and there's Vaibhav's parents dropping the invitation at the Jain temple in their neighborhood. And the second invitation goes to the senior-most member of the family, which was Vaibhav's nanny. So we got to go to Lucknow and hand deliver this invitation with a box of sweets. And 2 months later, she watched our wedding live. And before she passed away from this earth, she gave us her blessings. And so all I have to say is, if an 85-year-old woman from rural India can see love and acceptance and not have any questions or qualms, what's everybody else's problem?
And life is really short. This woman has seen so much in her life, but she embraced love over anything else. Life is really short. Focus on the side of love. Don't look at hatred.
So we got married and we did it up big. And we're not typically people who tend to do things big, but we thought it was important, both as a statement of our love, but also as a political statement. We got married in Texas in March of 2019 near my hometown. And we hosted a big traditional, big fat Indian wedding with 500 friends and family from around the world.
3 days.
And we did it over 3 days. And we did it because we wanted to show to other LGBT couples that you can have this. You can have the same love, the same respect, and the same dignity in your marriage that our straight cousins and brothers and sisters have as well. And we were really insistent on the fact that we wanted to celebrate all the traditions. So in addition to adapting customs like the ones that I've talked about, I wanted to do Mandi. And I said, why do only girls get to do Mandi? If we're going to break thousands of years of customs with the same-sex wedding, we might as well break this one too.
If you look closely in Parag's Mandi, there's a little Raja, there's a little king that he had to show that I'm marrying a king.
Yep, 2 kings.
2 kings.
And then we also wanted to make sure that the story of our wedding made news worldwide because we hoped it would inspire other people.
But and so more than that, in local languages.
In local languages. So we wanted to actually make sure that other Indian people both in India and around the world, would see this and that hopefully it would help inspire other people to come out. What we did not expect is how viral the story went. And it went viral for two reasons. The first was because people were seeing a gay couple following traditions of the Jain faith. But the second reason it went viral is because of the wedding toast that my dad gave. And if you haven't seen it yet, we'll share the link with you. But Now This did a really great video where they took pieces of my dad's speech and clipped them together. And it's basically my dad sharing the story of how he went from being a homophobic person to being an accepting and loving person, and the advice that he has to give for other parents. And it's in a very sort of traditional, this uncle kind of way that he speaks, but it really hit a nerve. And over 21 million people have now seen my dad's wedding toast. And we get the most amazing messages. Every day we hear from people.
That's the most beautiful part of this entire wedding.
We recently got a message from a woman in Nicaragua who told us that lesbians in her country are now playing my dad's video with Spanish subtitles to come out to their parents, because so much of the culture is similar in the way that parents and kids interact.
After we got married, the next day, I got a message from somebody on Facebook, said, you know, you don't know me, but I actually was bartending in your wedding. And, you know, I did not even know that this was a, same-sex wedding. And I have to tell you, I live in Central Texas and I'm gay and I'm not out yet. But if a community like yours, who could be so conservative, is so accepting and loving, I can't wait to come out to my family and, get married the way you did.
So I think the point of all this is, look, come out if you're ready to come out. If you're not ready or if it's not safe, we would never advise you to do so. But part of coming out was recognizing an important truth. Vaibhav and I grew up with no role models. We had no examples of brown, gay people living happy, successful lives. And it's sad, and it was hard for us to come out. But when we did, we realized another truth, which is we can be those role models. Each one of us, by telling our stories and by coming out, we make it easier for somebody else. And that's why we wanted to share our story with you today. So what we'd like to do now is, as we mentioned, you guys have sent some really interesting scenarios. We'd like to address a couple of scenarios that you all sent us and then take your questions. Sound good? Okay. Scenario number one, somebody wrote in and said, there are people in our parents' generation who are supportive of LGBTQ people, but if the subject doesn't come up in group settings, they don't bring it up. Maybe there's someone in the family who is silently struggling with their identity issues and wouldn't know that there are people in our family or community who wouldn't reject them, who would accept them no matter what. Is there a way to bridge that gap? What are some good ways to bring up the subject that won't make older family members too uncomfortable, but give them an opportunity to signal their support? So I love this question, and in part I love it because my Faiba is actually watching right now, and for me, she was that person. She was the person that I felt comfortable going to when I didn't feel comfortable talking to any other adult in my family and saying, this is what's going on with me. I'm feeling depressed. I'm struggling with this. And she was able to make it okay. She was able to bring up the subject. Here's the thing. For those of you who want to be allies, don't always make us be the ones that have the hard conversations. It's exhausting to always have to be the ones that push other people. Make spaces safe for your LGBTQ friends and family members to come out. And that's as simple as using the privilege that you have as a heterosexual or as a cisgendered person to start the conversation. Just like Vaibhav's cousins did with his grandmother. They made it okay to bring up the topic.
And a lot of times, we come from religious backgrounds. So I think it's important to bring religion in there. If, religion is what stops them from embracing, LGBTQ individuals or homosexuality as a subject, talk to them about it. Ask them these hard questions. What does religion talk about? Like, we talk about being accepting of everybody, loving every form of life. Why are homosexuals not a form of life? Asking these hard questions, but again, doing it all in a very respectful manner, because we should always be leading any conversation with love and kindness.
And nobody wants to feel like they're lectured, so do it in creative ways. There are a number of films, including Bollywood films recently, that have come out. Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga,
Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan,
which specifically deal with LGBT themes. So watch those as a family and then use it as a discussion point to say, how would we as a family want to show that we're accepting? Okay, scenario number two. I love this one. Okay for you, but not for me. How do you handle close family members who say things like, I do value LGBTQ people, but just not for our family? So this one comes up a lot. And I think the key is this. Love is love, right? Whether this is happening in somebody else's family or it's happening in ours. But it also requires us to be a little bit courageous. For those of you who are watching who do identify as LGBTQ or plus, it's important for you to have that courage. And if you're in a safe place and if you can come out, do it, because the only way this is going to change is if they know that there are people in their family. Our coming out didn't just affect our parents and our siblings. It affected our cousins, our uncles and aunts, and the people that they are friends with. And the fact that we've been so public about it has allowed people to contemplate what would it mean for there to be a gay person or a lesbian in our family.
And also, like Parag mentioned, finding allies is very important. Like Vaibhav was, his ally, but for me, I found my cousins to be allies. I actually started telling them and I asked them to talk to their parents. But, there were people who actually asked uncomfortable questions and, weren't really sure whether this was really a thing. But for me, what worked for me is when my nani, from my mom's side of the family said, this is okay, I love Vaibhav, I love Parag. Everybody just came in line. So find allies. When my cousins came up and told their parents, mom and dad, I think you should be thinking about this more logically. What you don't know, you shouldn't be talking about those things.
And this is an important difference, allies versus champions.
Yes.
Allies are people who form your community of support. Champions are people with power, people like my dad and his grandmother who use their power to shut everybody else up and make things okay for us.
Yeah.
So find those champions
and allies
and give them the support they need to do what they've got to do. Okay, last scenario. It's tough. Sometimes you're in a huge family group and saying anything would mean a whole argument that you are trying to avoid. This is especially true for my dysfunctional extended family. We all have dysfunctional extended families. But on days when I have the energy or patience, I would point out that one, it is rude, and two, I would try to dissect what their thought is and that it's incorrect or false. Explain that anyone who chooses love over anything else is doing good in the world. We got several of these kinds of questions around the WhatsApp group, right? How do I have these conversations on WhatsApp without being passive aggressive? Look, I think my number one piece of advice here is don't do these conversations on WhatsApp. I know that we are in a digital age. I know that because of social distancing, we're having to do a lot more via text message and email, but these are conversations that need to happen face to face, and even more so than over the phone. So if you can, try to have these kinds of conversations in person, because the other problem with WhatsApp, and this is true of Facebook as well, is when you call someone out on WhatsApp or on Facebook, you're doing it publicly. That's not a good way to change someone's mind. You see, the thing about people is nobody wants to be the villain in the story. And so when you make someone feel bad, like they're a homophobe or they're a bigot or they're discriminating, and you do it in a public forum, that person loses face. And it makes them dig deeper and become more defensive in their position. It doesn't open dialogue for change. So I spent a lot of my career in politics trying to persuade people to vote for a candidate or for a cause. And what I've learned in that work is that the best way to do that is to give people the ability to be good. Give them the opportunity to be the hero in the story. And that requires individual, personal, face-to-face interaction.
And if you are doing it on WhatsApp, find resources, find, positive messaging. Don't, lead with negative messaging. If they are sending you something rude, you send them something positive, because that's what our dharma teaches us. If somebody is, being aggressive towards you, show more kindness to that person. If they're saying something homophobic, outrageously, bigoted, you actually send them our wedding video and you're like, what? These two guys are awesome. You should be watching them and their parents.
And I think, Vaibhav's earlier point, use our Jainism, right? Because our Jainism tells us to seek truth. Our Jainism teaches us nonviolence. Why do we say Michami Dukram at the end of the year? Because it's not just the harm that we've created through our physical actions, it's also the harm we create through our words and through our thoughts. Yeah. And so I think reminding people, especially in our WhatsApp threads, and it doesn't have to be about sexual orientation or gender identity, but whenever people are expressing thoughts that have hate in them, have violence in them, remind them that our Jain values teach us to lead with love.
Yeah.
All right, so now with those three scenarios, and thank you again for submitting these, we want to go into some Q&A. And again, we have the Google link is open. So if you want to submit more Q&A, Dhwani is looking at it and she's going to ask us some audience questions.
But we're going to take 3 questions that we actually found in the pre-submitted questions.
So we got a lot of similar questions, and these are 3 of the most popular ones. The first one, did you become alienated from family members or shunned at Jain temples and events when you came out?
Oh, yes. So we actually have not had any, negative experience in a Jain temple, but to be honest, I still don't feel comfortable going to a Jain temple with Parag. If I want to hold his hand and enter the temple, I think 5 times because people are watching. My temple here in New York, I feel very uncomfortable. But I think what you guys are doing, conversations like these, would open those doors for both of us, being proud of who we are. But yes, we have faced, backlash from the community. So when we got married, when we were about to get married, we wanted to do it in the traditional Jain style. And we were looking for somebody to officiate our wedding. So in that process, I asked Parag's dad, Dad, can you, start looking for a priest? And he actually asked several Jain societies in Texas area And you know what they said? They were like, what are you talking about, Vijay bhai? This is not even in our faith. This is like abomination. Like, what are you talking about? And dad is like, well, first of all, when did you become a Christian? Because the word abomination is not even in Jainism. And what do you know about homosexuality, that is stopping you from, conducting any of this? Like, I don't want such negative energy. So, it's all right. You don't have to do it. We will find somebody. And God works in mysterious ways. And I'm like, this is impossible. How is it that in the entire United States of America, there's nobody who can perform a Jain wedding?
So he did the most Jain thing of all. He went to Google.
And I wrote Jain weddings in America. And you know what I found? There's actually a website.
Top result.
JainWeddingsUSA.com. And it's run by the most compassionate and nice person who we now love and is like a second father to us, is run by somebody named Mr. Ashok Sanghvi. Mr. Ashok Sanghvi is a chartered accountant by training, but he performs Jain weddings. He's a scholar of Jain text, and he performs Jain weddings all over the country. If you don't know of him, look him up. He is the most loving figure.
He lives in South Bend, Indiana. And what's amazing about the story is Vaibhav found his website, called my dad, and said, Dad, can you try calling this guy? He seems like he might be open to doing it. And my dad calls him. Now, Mr. Sanghvi has performed many Jain weddings, but he's never done a same-sex wedding. His daughter is a human rights lawyer. And a couple of days before my dad calls him, his daughter actually asked him, said, Dad, if some same-sex couple asked you to perform their wedding, I think she had a lesbian friend who was thinking about it, would you perform? And he said, no, I wouldn't. And she said, why? And he said, I don't know why. Let me think about that. And so this was in his head for 2 days when he got the phone call from my dad. And he likes to say it was like a sign that I got this call because it forced me to answer my own question. Why? There's no good reason not to, so he did. And after the wedding was over, we still stayed in touch with him. He's very close to us. He actually was in tears at our wedding. At the end of the ceremony, he was in tears. He said, this feels like the most loving, most wonderful thing, because he recognized that this was a wedding of two spirits and two families. And it didn't matter what gender they were. It didn't matter that it was different than what people are used to. This was about love. And that's how things change. All right, the second question that we got a lot of is, how do I come out to my parents? Look, I think first, and Malik said this earlier today.
I think Malik's on the call, by the way.
Oh, hey, Malik.
Hey, Malik.
So Malik said in his remarks, he said, we shouldn't be forcing people to come out when they're young because people should be ready. And I totally agree with that. I kind of got forced to come out before I was ready because a friend of mine saw me at a gay bar and then started gossiping to other of our high school friends. And so that kind of accelerated my timeline, and that's not cool. Don't push somebody to come out. Even if you have a friend or a family member and you suspect they're gay or they're gay, and sometimes we get inclined to like gossip about them. And you're like, why wouldn't they come out already? That's not your place. It is our right to come out on our own terms and in our own time. And some of us will come out early in our lives and when we're younger, and some people come out when they're later, and that's okay. I think the most important thing to understand, especially if you're heterosexual and cisgendered, meaning that you identify with the gender you were born with, is that you never have to come out. So this is not a question you have to deal with. We do. Now, for those of you who do identify as LGBT or Q, and how do you come out to your parents? Number one, safety first. Mm-hmm. If you are not in a situation where you will be physically and emotionally safe, I would not advise you to come out yet. I would advise you to find a community of people that give you that comfort, that give you that support and safety, and then tie yourself to that community.
That was actually a real concern for me because I was still finishing grad school. I mean, I had graduated early, but I was still finishing grad school. So this was a real possibility. I said, Parag, if I tell my parents in Zurich, what if they take my passport and they're like, well, leave all of this. You're coming back to India with us. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? He's like, you know what? Have you seen Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge? I'm going to come like Shah Rukh Khan and rescue you. I'm like, yeah, sure.
I did have this fantasy of being Shah Rukh.
But he also said that, and I'm like, but what if my dad says, okay, fine, you can stay here, do what you want. I'm going to stop funding you. But then he said, you know what, Vaibhav, I'm going to help you finish your education if that's what you need. So be absolutely, aware of your financial situation, your education situation. Come out at a time when you're stable, when you have a stable income, or if you are in a safe environment, only then come out. There is always a good time, and the good time will only be when you feel stable in your life. And second, I would add is that do it at a time when your parents are incredibly proud of you. He did at that time, I did it around the same time. Wherein he told, when did you tell your parents you had finished?
They had come to see me at some award ceremony and I was giving a speech and they were just, bursting with pride. And it was in that moment I decided. But look, I'm not saying that that's going to work for everybody. I think what's important is you want to time the coming out to a time when it's going to be comfortable for them to have the conversation. So don't do it when a lot of friends and family are going to be around. A lot of people seem to come out during like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Don't do that because those are high stress times. So you want to do things when you're going to be able to have the conversation and give yourself a few buffer days afterwards, so that as they're dealing with it, like one mistake I think that we made with Vaibhav is he came out to his parents on the last day of their trip, and they literally, he told him he was gay,
like, I'm done,
and he was like done with it, and then they had to get on a plane and go to India. And luckily, thanks to FaceTime, he was able to talk to his mom every day. But one thing that we both learned, your parents are going to need a lot of taking care of afterwards. It's like wound care after a surgery. You have to give a lot of attention. So you want to make sure that you come out at a time when you're going to be able to clear your calendar and really spend that time, because what they're going to want to know most of all is, have you changed? Are you now a different person? And what you're going to need to do is reassure them that you're the same loving, caring child that you were before, that you are now. And so there's lots of different ways to come out, but our recommendations to you: do it in person, do it when you're safe, do it when you can allot the right amount of time and attention to it, do it when your parents are going to feel good about it and feel proud.
And one last thing I would add is, go actually armed with some information about your own self. Don't like come out and then they ask you questions and you're like, I don't know, I have to look that up. No. Do your own research. When I told my parents, I read what Jainism had to say about it, what the Indian Psychological Association had to say about it, what the American Psychological Association had to say about it. I had, examples of people who are openly gay and, are successful. So that sort of gave them the message that I'm confident in who I am in the first place. So have that information, when you're going out and coming out to your parents.
Yeah, and I think, the other key is being confident. Both of us, in spite of trying not to, we both cried, because it is really scary and it's a big load off. But if you can try and be firm, because particularly if you're younger or if you're bisexual and you come out as bisexual, the often reaction is, oh, it's just a phase, or, oh, you're just immature and you don't know who you are yet, or you're figuring out who you are. And I think it's really important to convey, particularly to Desi parents, that we are confident and we are stable and we've thought this through, and that we come sort of armed with knowledge. All right, so let's do one last question from the ones that were submitted in advance. I love this one. Being unapologetically you can be tiring, yes, and sometimes anxiety-inducing and debilitating, especially if you often find yourself standing alone. It is sometimes easier to be apologetically you, meaning to back down and not be you at all, especially when it comes to interacting with family. How do y'all deal with these anxieties, and how do you take care of yourself?
Oh my God. Story of our lives. All of us go through this. You're not alone in this. Self-care. Self-care is everything. Please take time, especially during these COVID times, especially when our entire country is reckoning with the racial justice at the moment. Take time to recognize how fortunate we are that, we have a house that we can live in, we have stable income, we have food to eat. And, just remember that, it's so important. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling anxiety, seek a therapist. Mental health is a real issue. I suffer from mental health. I have anxiety. I have been diagnosed to have depression. And I did not want to talk about it for the longest time, but it was affecting my relationship. There were times that I had suicidal ideations, and I was so scared because, now it would affect my relationship, somebody who I love. So one day I was just like in a mall, and Parag and I were just, walking up the escalator, and I told Parag, and I said, I think I have mental health issues. I think I need to see a therapist. And he was so happy, and I
gave him a big hug on the escalator.
Yeah, and so seek treatment if you have to. Our community stigmatizes mental health so much, and not just LGBTQ people. In our own community, we have so much of damage that we can have emotionally, because we are a very different community. We have a lot, especially for you guys. When you grow up in America, you have an Indian identity you're handling, and then you have an American identity you have to handle. Parag tells me these stories, and it was hard for your parents. It's hard for you. So please seek help, and there's no shame in seeking help. If you need help, come to me. I will actually help you find somebody.
And I will also just add that one of the things that we've both been doing together and really restarted in the last few days is meditation. And I know we've had classes on meditation through YJA, and thank you all so much for providing that.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Because I think we all have to recognize that whatever baggage we carry, whether it's the trauma of being bullied, or whether it's the fear of being out and being our true selves, or whatever went on in your life, it all affects who we are today. It all still lives with us. And so really making the space for self-care and taking time to learn the same way we would deal with our physical health by eating well and exercising, we have to do for our mental health. And luckily, as Indian Americans, and particularly as Jains, we are so well equipped for this because we come out of a tradition that prioritizes emotional and mental well-being. So thank you so much for that question. And thank you so much for the time. I'm going to turn it back to Dhwani to ask us some more questions.
Cool, thank you. First of all, I just want to give Parag and Vaibhav a huge, huge thank you for sharing your inspiring and incredibly beautiful story and inspiring us all to be true champions for equality along the way. We also wanted to take a quick minute to highlight some of our upcoming social programming today. We really hope to see you guys at our next event, YJA World, a community showcase, which will then be followed by bingo and JNF. That's all from us for now, and we'll hand it back over to Parag and Vaibhav to answer some questions that I will just be communicating via Zoom right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to put you all on gallery view so we can see all your beautiful faces. So if you're not on video, this is a great time to turn on your video because we want to take a quick family photo. Oh my God, it's so great to see all of you.
Hey, you guys.
Yeah, there you go. Get your hair done. That's right. That's looking good.
So
Look
cute.
at the horns. I love them. I love them. Look at them. Put the horns up. This is awesome, you guys. It's so great to see all of you.
Oh my God, there are 187 people.
You are beautiful and you are perfect and you all look amazing.
And we're so thankful for all of you. This is the community we're so proud of because, you know, you guys will make all the difference in our community. Until today, I don't think we've really talked about homosexuality, LGBTQ rights so openly. So this is so refreshing and it's all because of you guys. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
So if you want to ask a live question and become like a little celebrity, Dhwani's going to call on people, but just click on participants and do the raise your hand button. And that way she can see you. And we're happy to stay as long as you want and answer any questions. Hey, Asmi, it's good to see you. Hey, Vaibhav.
Hi, Vaibhav.
For now, I'm going to go ahead and answer, pose a couple of questions that we've already received in our live. So first one, this is a cute one, but did you know early into dating that the other person was the one?
Ooh, well, for me, I did. And I'll tell you, you know, I don't know. I didn't want to get into the details because, you know, we are limited on time. But when I first met Parag, you know, I saw him at a Pride parade. I had no idea who this dude was. He was super cute. Whenever you saw
It
still is, yes. Nothing has changed. But he was marching in the Pride parade in a South Asian, you know, forum. And then whenever he'd see somebody remotely Desi looking, he'd go and start dancing with that guy. I'm like, who is this dude? So I did some digging. I mean, in the hindsight.
Stalking. He did some stalking.
Oh, come on. It worked out. So yeah, don't complain. So when I did that, I saw in his profile and I saw, I mean, he had an open Facebook profile and it said the word Jain in religious views. I'm like, Vaibhav, this is a sign. Where else will you find a brown, gay, Jain guy? Dude, even if this doesn't work out, you have to pursue. So I don't know, there was a hint that I got from my higher power and I believe in that higher power of mine. And but I think a month into our relationship, we sort of knew that he is my soulmate.
I knew actually on the first date. He took me to this really terrible Thai restaurant. And before that, so those of you who know my dad, who's spoken at YJ about his matchmaking service, my dad has spent the last 15 years doing matchmaking for young Desi people. And I remember asking my dad, you know, you set everybody else up on a date. Why have you never set me up on one? Is it because I'm gay? He's like, no, I meet so many gay people. You've just never asked me to. So he'd set me up on a couple of dates, usually with doctors, usually Republicans, not a good fit for me. And finally, he said, you know what, Parag, your problem is this. When you go on dates, you talk too much. And so what you need to do is you need to like listen more. So I had that in my head when we went on our first date. And I didn't say a word. I literally let him talk for an entire hour.
He met his match finally.
And he talked about Jainism. And I grew up Jain, but you know, I didn't grow up knowing sort of as much as he did. So he was telling me all this really interesting stuff about his faith and how he thinks about it. And I remember by the end of it thinking, I met my match. Like this guy, you know, this guy can go toe to toe with me. And so I'm glad. So thanks for the question.
Before I get to a couple one, I just wanted to bring this one up real quick in case other people wanted to know too, but how can we stay in contact with you guys after this session?
Absolutely,
yep.
Yes.
We will share our contact information right after we finish the questions.
Perfect, thank you. Next question. Recently, I explained to my parents what LGBTQ plus exactly is. They took it well, but I realized the reason they didn't know anything about it is because adults in their generation don't really speak of it. They treat it like an illness. How can you get people to openly talk about it and share it comfortably?
Yeah, so I think this was one of the scenarios we talked about, but it's the idea of making space and finding opportunities. Look, there is so much more today than when we were growing up on television, on the news. We had a gay person running for president this year. I mean, that's a big deal. And so when those things happen, when you're sitting with mom and dad and you're watching something on TV and LGBTQ identities are even brought up, that's a good moment to pause and say, you know what, mom and dad, I've been learning a lot about what it is like for LGBTQ people. And did you know that there are so many people in our community who have struggled to come out? You can even use this YJA session. In fact, I encourage all of you that now that you've sat through the session, tweet about it, write about it, post on Facebook about it, and talk to your parents about it. When they ask you, how was YJA this year? You should say, we had Malik Pancholi, an openly gay actor, talk about his life growing up. We had Parag and Vaibhav, a couple that got married in a Jain tradition, talk about it. It was inspiring, and it made me realize that there's this whole rich world of people that are part of our community and that we should celebrate.
And like Parag said, there's so much in the media at the moment. Actually take opportunities. You have a Thanksgiving break, you're at home, actually watch these Bollywood movies who are talking about these subjects. And earlier Bollywood used to treat this entire subject with a lot of humor and looking down upon the entire subject. But now there's some really beautifully and well thought movies, not just in Hindi, but other languages. So encourage your parents, watch it as a family, and after that just ask them, what do you think? And it'd be surprising to a lot of people I know, because you guys, a lot of you and your family speak Gujarati. There were Gujarati news channels who actually covered our story, and dad and mom, Parag's parents, actually shared those with their family members. So people are talking about it. Find those resources, and if you can't find them, trust me, come to us, we'll give you those resources.
Yeah, and I think the last point I would just make here is that if you are in a situation, let's say you're with your family or friends, and people are talking about gay people in a joking way, when they're making fun of us, speak up.
Yep.
Because people don't know what they don't know. And so part of it is just being exposed. A lot of you were exposed to LGBT people because you saw them in school, in college. Your parents didn't have that experience. So rather than being angry at them for what they don't know, help expose them. Take them to environments where they'll meet gay people. Bring gay friends home to meet them. Invite them for dinner. One thing about Desi parents is they can never be rude to a guest. And so it doesn't matter what you are, whether you're black, brown, Muslim, gay, straight, whatever, if you're in their house, they have to treat you with respect. So bring one home.
And the one example that Parag and I love at the moment is the show on Netflix, Hulu. It's called Love, Victor. So this is the story of a Hispanic kid living in a Catholic family and being gay. And trust me, the similarities of our communities is amazing.
Yeah, it's a great show.
If you have some time, watch that show, Love, Victor, on Hulu. Amazing, really beautiful.
I just want to go to one last question that we got before we open up to the audience ones. So we got asked a lot, how can I be a better ally to the LGBTQ communities, right? And everything we've talked about, from signaling your support to speaking up and not making us have to always be the ones that say things, standing up when people are being discriminatory and shutting it down. But this year, there's something really important that every single one of you can and must do. If you care about people like us, if you care about people who have been marginalized and discriminated against, if you saw the session with Brittany earlier today, and you care about fighting racism against our Black and brown brothers and sisters, there's a really important thing you can all do as allies. What is that?
Vote. Please vote. I know this is the most important election of our lifetime. People say that, but guys, this is personal for me. I am still on a green card. I cannot vote. If we have 4 more years of hatred that you see in this country at the moment, I have the risk of being deported. My marriage could be invalidated. I cannot adopt children. I can't do anything with my life. So it's really personal to me. So it's my personal request to all of you, please go vote. And if you haven't already registered to vote, there's this fantastic organization, nonprofit that does API outreach for voters, and text API to 788683, and you can actually register to vote, and ask your friends, family to register to vote. Make sure you vote. And I know because of COVID, there's a lot of mail-in ballot questions and all of that. Please, there are lots of resources available. Ask us if you don't find them in local languages. So please, please, please vote.
Great. And there's our contact information, so please do stay in touch.
So the email is paragandvaibhav@gmail.com. Really simple, Parag, A-N-D, Vaibhav@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We'll talk to you guys. Okay, do you want to go back to Dhwani?
Yeah, I did have one more question on the Google form that I thought would be good to share. But if you've got an identity that is more easily hidden, like being bi but open to a long-term heterosexual relationship, or being asexual but open to a romantic relationship with someone of the opposite gender, what are your thoughts about just hiding that identity and choosing a partner who's more quote unquote acceptable? It's scary to think about coming out, and I feel like it's just easier to go along with what's expected.
Look, we're never going to tell you to take the more difficult path, because you've got to think about your own future and you've got to think about self-preservation. But it goes back to what we said about seeking truth. At the end of the day, you owe it to yourself, not to anybody else, to live your truth. And if it's one thing, if you're choosing to pass as a heterosexual or pass in a certain gender identity or as asexual, because that's what's comfortable for you. But if you're doing it because you're trying to make other people comfortable, then that's no way to live your life. You know, we often say in Jainism that we're all responsible for our own karma, right? When I die, I don't take him with me. And his karmas are his and my karmas are mine and yours are yours. And so if you're lying, if you're hiding, if you're moving away from the truth, you're earning karma for doing that. That's the Jain point of view on it. But I think the human point of view on it is pretty simple, which is you want to live your best life, and you can't do that if you're trying to appease everybody else.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Parag said. And you know what is also important is that talking to your parents about this, being honest about it. That's what I did not do when I was in India. I was doing exactly the same thing, and I realized I was sick and tired of this, because I'm like, why am I compromising my own happiness by keeping everybody else happy? You deserve to be happy, so choose happiness over misery and sadness and all of that. Honestly, it will show you such a beautiful light. It will make you so happy if you just choose honesty. But again, it's different for everybody. Choose your circumstances, look at your circumstances, see what's safe and best for you, and just do that. Anything else, Dhwani?
I think those are all the questions that I had on the Google form for now.
No questions? Great. Well, thank you so much. It's great being with all of you today.